All right, so welcome to today's webinar, Considerations and Resources for Developing the Monitoring Plan for IEP Goals. Today's webinar is hosted by the Progress Center, an Office of Special Education funded center aimed at promoting progress for students with disabilities. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted on the center's website, www.promotingprogress.org. Live captioning is available. You can find the CC in the lower right-hand corner. Now, my name is Tessie Bailey, and I will be moderating today's session. I'm the director of the Progress Center. Now, the center's purpose is to provide information, resources, tools, and technical assistance services to support local educators in developing and implementing high-quality educational programming. Now, to support local educators, we share guidance, tools, resources that are based on existing research, state and federal and law and policy, and our local experience. And as part of our year 2 work, we've actually begun partnering with select local districts and schools, super exciting, develop the knowledge and skills and infrastructure necessary to promote progress for students with disabilities. Now, why do we do what we do? Well, the center was developed in response to the Andrew F. Supreme Court decision, which you'll see on the next slide. And this decision states that an IEP must be reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances. Now, under IDEA, the Individualized Education Program, which we commonly refer to as the IEP, serves as the foundation for promoting progress for students with disabilities. Today's webinar will present an overview of one of the IEP components that are required under IDEA, specifically the monitoring plan. Now, this Progress Center webinar is part of a robust set of training and resources that are available to support local educators in developing and implementing an IEP by well-qualified educators. Now, as I mentioned, the Progress Center focuses on promoting progress for students with disabilities, and we do that through the development and implementation of high-quality educational programming. And for most students, this begins with the development of the IEP. Now, we know a well-designed IEP ensures that students will have access to special education and related services and supplementary aids and services necessary to benefit and access the core programming and progress towards ambitious annual goals. Now, while today's webinar focuses on the development of the programming through the IEP, we know that implementation is equally important. Now, we will be hosting a series of resources in our year 3, so stay tuned for future webinars and modules focused on the implementation of the IEP. Now, I am pleased to introduce our speakers for today. We have Shidi Hashemali, who oversees our Progress Center field-initiated requests in schools that are underserved by IDEA Technical Assistance Center. She is a former staff member of the Tennessee Department of Education and a U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs. We also have with us Kim Scow, who is with the IRIS Center that's placed at Vanderbilt University. She coordinates the production of IRIS Center resources and online tools about evidence-based instructional and behavioral practices. And for nearly 20 years, Kim has served as one of the IRIS Center's lead resource developers, working with top researchers in the field to translate their content into practical information that educators can put into their own classrooms. And then finally, we have Dr. Caitlin Majika, and she comes to us from the National Center on Intensive Intervention, where she contributes technical assistance and her expertise to guide the development and application of standards for reviewing universal screening tools, progress monitoring tools, and interventions. And prior to joining AIR, Dr. Majika was an assistant professor at special education at the University of North Texas and a special education teacher in Rhode Island. So I'm going to pass this over to Shidi, who's going to get us started.
Thank you, Tessie. Now that our presenters have been introduced, we'd like to give y'all a chance to introduce yourselves. Take a moment to respond to the poll question to let us know within what role you are joining us today. So, what is your current role that has led you to learn more about the importance of measuring and reporting student progress? Are you 1, a special educator, 2, a general educator, 3, an administrator, or do you have another role? Please let us know. Okay, looks like we're getting some in. And it looks like the winner is administrator, but the runner-up is others. And if you want to, in the chat, you are welcome to add what are some of the other roles that are with us today. So we've got school psychologists, admin support, a parent mentor, related service provider. Well, first of all, I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today. Okay. So today we're going to have a session, and our 5 objectives that we are going to be looking at are explaining what IDEA requires for each child's IEP in terms of monitoring plan to measure progress towards the annual goal. Our next objective is to review tips for developing and implementing a monitoring plan. We will share some resources for developing and implementing a monitoring plan. And 4, we'll be having an introduction to the NCII tools chart. And finally, we will be looking at using NCII tools chart to evaluate progress monitoring tools. In addition to the present levels of academic and functional performance, or PLAFs, and the measurable and annual goals, IDEA requires that the IEP include a description of how the child's progress towards meeting that annual goal will be measured. The purpose of this section of the IEP is to ensure that the team is monitoring the extent to which IEP is reasonably calculated to assist the child in meeting their goals. In addition, it provides data that can be shared with parents, the child, and support educators in making timely changes to the IEP if students are not benefiting from the current program. The support educators in developing an appropriate monitoring plan, to support the educators in developing an appropriate monitoring plan, the Progress Centers developed this tip sheet. And it's available through a link that'll be provided right there in the chat. It outlines things to do and things to avoid. It also provides several links to resources, some of which will be shared in today's webinar to help IEP teams address the component of the IEP. As a federal law, all states must ensure that their schools and districts meet the minimum requirements set forth under IDEA. Many states go above and beyond and establish additional requirements for the IEP, like a shorter timeline or additional components for the IEP. It's important to check with your State Department of Education to see if there are additional rules or procedures that you need to follow. In the chat box, we're going to place a link that goes to an interactive map. This allows you to click on your state and access your State Department of Education website, as well as the state's special education website information. Today, we'll focus on the minimum requirements that all states and their districts and schools must adhere to according to the federal IDEA regulations. It's important to note that it is key that the data being collected are used to further advance student growth and achievement. As a result, parents are also provided a consistent and timely summary of their child's progress within the program and modify the IEP if necessary. A detailed plan should be agreed upon during the IEP meeting. In addition to a report that is provided to the parent, any updates or concerns should not only be discussed, but also provided in writing. One thing to note is IDEA does not specifically address how to develop a quality monitoring plan. However, it does require that within the IEP, details must be provided on how a child's progress will be measured. The results will give the IEP team data as to whether the individualized program that was designed by that IEP team is effective, or is it going to need adjustments to be made via the services or the instruction that the child is receiving. The Progress Center has developed tips which are aimed to assist the IEP team in developing a high-quality monitoring plan. It's important to use objective measures. This means that the progress needs to be measured in numbers, not in words. Some examples are chapter test scores or behavior observation. Having an objective measure provides that data that can be evaluated, and then decisions can be made based upon that scientific method. Try not to use subjective measures as someone's opinion or perception. If a child's having a bad day or not behaving well, it can easily affect, of course, your perception. Unconsciously, the feedback that's provided during the subjective assessment can be then skewed. It's also important to measure frequently and consistently. Inconsistent measurement is difficult to evaluate, and the data can't be utilized to see the growth or trend provided through accurate feedback. Another tip that the Progress Center recommends is to identify one person that's been trained to collect data, such as a general education teacher or a school psychologist. Assuming or expecting someone that does not have that training to collect the data could result in inaccurate results, which could easily affect the child's evaluation and progress. Professional development opportunities for staff to learn more about how to collect the data for a monitoring plan is also beneficial, and it can result in less errors during the process. This also provides a foundation to the individual when circling back with the team in terms of feedback and next steps. Therefore, it would also be beneficial if the student was very familiar or comfortable with the individual who is administering this assessment. It's important to identify a setting or a context into which the data is going to be collected. So for example, you could do it during math instruction or in the playground. Just stating that it was done at school doesn't provide the team the necessary information to understand if the setting or the subject matter affected the results of the assessment. Having a consistent and comfortable setting where the assessment can be administered is also really essential for the student. He or she will know what to expect during the evaluation, and the results are probably going to be more consistent as there's less disruption and anxiety for the student. Schedules play an important role in developing the monitoring plan. It's important that whoever is responsible for collecting the data maintain a consistent data schedule. This ensures for, of course, consistent data collection, and it shouldn't be based upon if the student's happy or having a bad day or feels like taking a test, or when the teacher has time to complete the assessment. It's very similar to what we discussed before in establishing a consistent setting and having a schedule that will also benefit the student. Finally, the performance criteria should be based from the annual goals. This means that when you're reporting back to the stakeholders, they need to have a good understanding in terms of how well the child is performing based upon what was initially projected in their annual goals. Using performance criteria that is different does not provide a clear picture of the student's progress. So for example, if a child was to have 5 observations as a part of their annual goal, you would report Susie was able to read with, for example, 85% accuracy during 3 out of 5 of the read aloud assessments. You would not want to say Susie read most of her assessments with ease. So we want to make sure that we have that data. Next, I'm going to hand this over to Kim Scow, who will tell us more about the Iris Center's progress monitoring resources. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sheedy. Before I begin, I just want to thank the Progress Center for inviting us to participate in this webinar today, and also to thank you for joining us today. I also want to point out that Naomi Tyler, the director of the Iris Center, is going to join us behind the scenes. She's going to be adding information into the chat box and answering any Iris-related questions that come in today. So to begin, I just want to give you a quick overview of the Iris Center and what we do. We do develop free open educational resources, or OERs, about working with all students, especially struggling learners and those with disabilities. The Iris OERs focus on evidence-based practices, and they address important instructional and classroom issues. And that includes assessment. As Sheedy just noted on one of her tip sheets, when measuring progress toward meeting annual IEP goals, educators should use objective measures such as progress monitoring probes for reading and mathematics. So today I want to introduce you to 2 of our modules on progress monitoring. Before I do that, I just want to give you a quick overview of Iris modules. They are our signature resource. They're self-contained, self-paced, and self-guided. They're also grounded in adult learning theory. They translate research to practice, and they're developed in collaboration with content experts. And as you can see in this graphic, the modules consist of 5 components that have been repeatedly recognized in educational research as important components of learning. The first is a challenge, and that's a realistic scenario relevant to educational professionals. And that's a short video, usually 2 to 3 minutes in length. Then it goes on to the initial thoughts. Those are questions that allow users to explore and consider what they currently know about the scenario presented in the challenge. Not only does it activate the learner's prior knowledge, but it allows faculty and PD providers to assess what their students or participants already know, and if they have misperceptions, then to address those. The third component is perspectives and resources, and this is where we house all the content. We break it into nuggets of information, we scaffold that information, we use bulleted text, videos, audios, different components to really make it, to break it down and make it easily digestible for learners and to allow them to actively engage with that content. And you're going to see some examples of that a little later. The fourth component is the wrap up, and that's just a summary of the information we've presented so far. And then it ends with the assessment, and that's an evaluation tool that offers the users the opportunity to apply what they know and to also evaluate what topics they need to study further. And they have that opportunity then to go back and do that. Okay, next slide. Okay, and to locate our modules, you'll first go to the IRIS website, and that's iris.peabody.vanderbilt.edu, or just a real simple URL is iriscenter.com. And there will be 5 tabs across the top of the website. The first one is resources. So you click on resources. There's a drop-down menu, and you want to click on the first item. That's the IRIS Resource Locator. Next slide. Okay, and once you click on that IRIS Resource Locator, you will get there. You'll see that you can sort by topic, resource type, or module element. The default is topic, and that's what we're going to look at today. The progress monitoring modules that we want to highlight are located under assessment, which includes progress monitoring. Once you drop that down, the first item in that menu is modules. So you want to click on that, and that's going to give you a list of all the modules listed alphabetically. One of the modules that we're going to be highlighting today is in that list. It's called Progress Monitoring Reading. The objectives for that module are to identify the different types of classroom assessments, to understand how progress monitoring, in particular general outcome measurement or GOM, can inform instruction, to administer, score, and graph GOM measures, to evaluate student data to make informed instructional decisions, and to use graphs to facilitate communication with not only the student, but with parents and other educators as well. The other module we want to highlight is Progress Monitoring Mathematics. And you can see here that the objectives are the same. These modules are very parallel in the content that is presented. The big difference is the information on how to select the measures and then how to administer and score those probes. So I will be kind of switching back and forth and highlighting the differences as we go through. So both of these modules start with an overview of progress monitoring. They talk about the benefits of this type of assessment, and they differentiate between the 2 types of progress monitoring: mastery measurement and general outcome measurement. And I also want to break up or mention that, as I mentioned before, we break the information into nuggets. One way we do that is provide information boxes. The one here provides a little more in-depth information on the differences between mastery measurement and general outcome measurement. And as you can see, there's a link in that box that takes you to a handout that we developed to really kind of go in depth a little further. And you're going to see some other boxes throughout, and I'll point those out as well. Then after we do the overview, we really go through how to progress monitor step by step. And you can see we break these down. These are each pages. It begins with how to select a measure. The illustration highlighted here is from the reading module. And you can see we provided more information on the different types of reading probes. We have the kindergarten letter sound fluency probe, for first grade word identification fluency, mid first to sixth grade, that's passage reading fluency, and then for fourth through sixth graders, the MACE fluency. And once you click on any of those menu bars, it opens up and provides a description of that probe, as well as gives you a sample probe to look at. We do something very similar in the mathematics module. As you can see, we've got a table that breaks down the different kinds of math probes, one being the computation probe. And each of the little visuals is a link that will take you to more information on the different types or the elementary and the secondary probes for computation. We also provide samples for the concepts and application probes. We've got the elementary right now. Currently, there's no valid middle school or high school computation and application probe, but when that's available, we'll add that in as well. The next step is to create a graph. And as you can see, we have started the very, very basics here. And but we do lead them on how to create that graph. And one of the things that we provide on this page is a link to one of the NCII tools. And we try to provide those kind of tools throughout our modules, just to provide a little more information that teachers can take to implement these steps in their classroom. The next one goes into creating a goal line, and we break that step down as well. We scaffolded information. We really talk about first establishing a baseline, then determining the expected goal, and then drawing that baseline. And at the end of that section, we provide a practice opportunity where the user is provided data and they're asked to plot the goal line. Then we go one step further and we discuss determining goals for struggling learners using the intra-individual framework. And we provide an opportunity to practice how to determine students' end-of-year goal using this framework. The next step that we talk about is how to administer and score those probes. We provide information about that. Then we provide demonstrations of someone administering and scoring 3 different types of probes for reading, which is the word identification fluency, the passage reading fluency, and the MACE fluency. And then we follow that up with a practice opportunity, which is in this little box illustrated on the slide. And you can see that there's a practice opportunity to administer and score each of those probes as well. Then we go into, well, and it's for the math, we also do the same thing. So we discuss how to score both elementary and secondary computation probes, and we have a practice opportunity then to score a probe. We next talk about graphing and how to graph that data, and we provide a practice opportunity so that the learners can practice graphing. And then finally, once they have that graph data or that visual representation of the data, we discuss how to make data-based instructional decisions. And once again, we provide a practice opportunity. And as you can see, we're pulling 2 of these students through. So, you know, these are 2 of the students that they've had an opportunity to practice administering scoring with, to graph their data, and now to make instructional-based decisions using that data. And then finally, we discuss how to communicate progress with the students, parents, and other professionals using the graph data. And this step is also accompanied by a practice opportunity, so they get practice thinking about what the data mean and how to communicate that to others. And so throughout these modules, we really break down step by step how to progress monitor, but on those individual pages, we break those steps down even further and scaffold that information. And then one thing I want to point out before I end is that we have free PD certificates available for educators for those 2 modules, as well as for 36 other modules. And we're continuing to add to that collection all the time. These can be accessed by clicking on the PD options tab at the top of our website. That's one of the tabs that I mentioned earlier. It's right next to the resources tab, so it's easy to locate. And then if you ever have questions about these resources or anything else on our website, we encourage you to contact us, and we will put that contact information on the web. It's on the website, but we'll put it in the chat box as well. And now I want to pass this over to Caitlin Majika from the National Center on Intensive Intervention. She is going to be sharing considerations for selecting technically adequate measures to monitor progress over time.
Thanks, Kim. Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Majika, and I'm very excited to be here with my colleagues from the Progress Center and the IRIS Center to share our tools charts to help you select and evaluate progress monitoring tools. So to begin, just to give an overview of our center, the mission of the National Center on Intensive Intervention is to build capacity of state and local education agencies, universities, practitioners, and other stakeholders to support the implementation of intensive intervention in reading, mathematics, and behavior for those students with severe and persistent learning and behavioral needs. And part of our work with the center has been to develop a series of tools charts. We have 4 tools charts dedicated to assessment. So 2 on screening, 1 for academic screening, 1 for behavior screening. We have 2 tools charts dedicated to progress monitoring tools. Again, 1 for academics, 1 for behavior. And then we also have 2 tools charts dedicated to interventions. Again, 1 for academic, 1 for behavior. Today, we are going to go over the components of the academic progress monitoring tools charts. And we're doing this for 2 purposes. One, it may be that you have progress monitoring tools that have been used in your school, assigned by your district, or available. And so you may be wondering, what is the quality of those tools, and are they good tools for progress monitoring? Or you may be in the position to be selecting a new progress monitoring tool or set of progress monitoring tools, and you'd like to know what is out there and what is the evidence to support them. So our tools charts across the boards can be used both ways. And today I'm going to highlight the key features of the tools chart so you can understand how to navigate them and learn more information about the tools we have available. On the next slide here, we see information about how do tools get to be on our tools charts. So on average, we hold a yearly call for submissions, and we allow any sort of vendor of evidence-based tools, we invite them to respond to those calls. And these vendors may be any product developers, researchers, or any other proprietors who have assessment tools that they would like to be featured and rated on our tools charts. Once we receive the submissions from the vendors, all of the tools go through a review process through our technical review committees, or TRCs. We have 1 TRC dedicated to each of the 6 tools charts, and these groups are made up of national content and methodological experts. So they take our rating rubrics and they will assess the quality of each of the tools submitted, and they use rigorous evidence standards to review the tools, and that is what is presented on the tools chart. So it's important to note that we don't just publish tools that are deemed quote unquote evidence-based. We publish all tools that are received to us, and then there you can see how the evidence stands up against our rating rubrics based on feedback and comments from the technical review committees. So let's dive in and see a little bit more information about this academic progress monitoring tools chart. If you visit this tools chart on our NCII website, this is what you will see for the landing page. We have a little bit of information at the top. Any sort of new or key features or changes will be announced at the top. You see a legend explaining our rating. We will go into that in more detail in a few moments. You then see a filter, and then you see the actual tools chart. And the tools chart will list the name of the tool, the area it focuses on, the grade level, and then the measure type. And then it has 3 tabs and shows you the rating or key information for a variety of technical features and usability features of the tools. Today, I'm going to go over each of these features of the tools charts in more detail. So when you visit these, you can understand what they look like and what information you're seeing. So to start, I want to share with you the filter. And so here in this gray box, you see the filter. You may come to the tools chart with a specific content area in mind. Let's say you're looking for a math tool. Perhaps you're looking for a grade level in mind. Let's say you work in middle school and you want tools that have been validated at the middle school level. Or perhaps you have some resource constraints and you're looking to fit in a tool with resources. So that may be depending on the cost of the tool, the level of training required, the type of administration format and technology required. So does it involve a computer or is it hand scored and delivered? You can filter by all of those and really narrow down what you're seeing on the chart so that you're really looking at the tools that are of use to you and of relevance to you given the resources you may have. Before we go on, I'd also like to point out that at the top of the filter, we also have the legend. And here this explains the rating system we use across all of our tools charts and shows you the level of evidence we have across each of the standards that we rate. So a full bubble, so that full orange circle we call bubbles, means there's convincing evidence that tool for that standard has met the evidence fully. A half bubble means there's partially convincing evidence it met part of the standards. An empty bubble means there is not sufficient evidence yet. And a dash just simply means they haven't reported that information yet. So those will be useful when we go to the next slide and look at what that looks like on the tools chart and how you can discern the information. For this next part, I'm going to take you to images of the tools chart, and we're going to go through those 3 tabs at the top, the performance level standards, the growth standards, and the usability features. And I'm going to share with you the information you can find on each of those tabs, and then give you a little bit more information about what those mean. So let's start with the first one. These are your performance level standards. You may hear that you need progress monitoring tools that are valid and reliable. Well, you can come to our tools chart and look here on this first tab and see the reliability and validity of all of the tools that we have on our chart. We also have information if the vendor has conducted a bias analysis. And while this information is not rated in a bubble, you will see a yes or no, and that information you can learn more about what analyses were conducted. If we go to the next slide, you can see what that looks like across the row. So as mentioned earlier, each tool is a row on the tools chart. And for each of those standards I mentioned within this tab, you will see either a rating or more information. So for this specific tool for iStation, you can see that we have a full bubble for reliability, an empty bubble for validity, and this vendor has conducted a bias analysis. So you can use this information to think about or assess a tool you have, or think about a tool that you may be wanting to purchase for your school. I would also like to note that we have strategically created this tools chart that allows you to pull the information to the level of detail that you want. So perhaps you are very comfortable with just looking at these bubble ratings. They have been vetted by our technical review committee. You want to just look at the information on the tools chart. That's great. You can absolutely do that. But let's say you're interested in the data the vendor provided, or you want to know what it means if there's an empty bubble for validity. If you click on the bubble, so you can click on the full bubble for reliability here, the empty bubble for validity, or the word yes for bias analysis, and you will learn more information about what is that feature. So what is reliability, what is validity, and then you can actually see the data the vendor has provided to support their analysis of reliability or validity. So if you're really interested in the numbers and the data, the pop-ups are for you. Click on those bubbles and you can see and learn more information about those standards we have. And this is available across all of the columns with ratings and information. So now let's go to the next slide, which we will see an example rubric. So I mentioned earlier that we have these technical review committees that are evaluating the evidence. And I wanted to give you an example here of what it may look like for this standard of validity for a tool to meet a full bubble, a half bubble, or an empty bubble rating. Again, these are written pretty technically, but we wanted to show you the type of information we're looking for and expecting from vendors when they submit the evidence. So for validity, we're interested in having multiple sources of validity analyses. We need at least 2. They need to be justified and be aligned with the information in the tool used. And we make sure that the evidence was drawn from a sample of students that's representative across learners across a variety of performance levels. And on top of that, we also make sure that the analyses show that their validity meets this minimum threshold or exceeds that. And so if a vendor can provide all that information, it will earn a full bubble. If it can partially meet that, it's a half bubble. And if the vendor is not quite there yet or doesn't have sufficient data, it would receive an empty bubble. So this is one example. Again, these are rubrics that are available for every standard. If you are interested in them, go ahead and click those bubbles within the tools chart and you can learn more about each of the standards we have. So that was performance level standards. The next tab is growth standards. And here we provide ratings across 5 items. We first rate sensitivity, and this includes an analysis of the reliability and validity of the slope, so growth over time. We also analyze the presence of alternative forms that are available for this tool. And then we also evaluate the decision rules that the vendor has in determining if they're technically sound and they're based on theoretical rationales. So here we think about the decision rules for setting and revising goals. And then we also think about those key decision rules for when a change in instruction is necessary. So these are the 5 standards that we rate. And on the next slide, you can see it's the same as with the first tab, that you just look across the row for a specific tool at a specific grade level, and you can see the evidence that has been rated for this tool. And just like before, if you're interested in learning even more information or what that means, you can click on the bubble or the dash, and a pop-up will appear to give you more information. If we go to the next slide, I've given you another example of a rubric. This one is for the alternate forms item that we rate. And this is, again, it's just an example of how vendors can achieve a rating of full, half, or empty bubble. And here for alternate forms, we require that there are at least 20 alternate forms. And we have strong evidence of comparability across the forms. And again, the evidence is drawn from a sample of students in need of intensive intervention. So this information is available in the pop-up if you're interested, but also know that the TRC uses this information to assign those ratings. So it's perfectly fine if you look through those evidence and you really want to use those bubbles to drive and inform your selection or your understanding of the tools you may have. And finally, we have the usability tab. And here, none of the items are rated with a bubble, but they are rated and categorized to provide information about these 4 items. So it's the administration format, the administration scoring and time, the scoring format, and then those benchmarks. So the rates of improvement and end of year benchmarks that you may need, and are those available for each tool. So here we can go to the next slide and you will look across the row and you can see that we've labeled and identified sort of what the administration format is. So this first one can be individual or group and it's computer administered. It takes about 30 minutes. The scoring is automatic. And then there are benchmarks available for the rate of improvement and the end of year benchmarking. And when you're looking at the tools chart, sometimes the technical standards are what you're interested in, and sometimes it is these more resource-driven decisions. And so we just want to make sure that you have all of the information you need if you're selecting a new tool or perhaps considering one that you already have. So now that I've given you a walkthrough of what is on the tools charts, how you can navigate with the filter, what are the standards we use for evidence, and then what are some other those key features, you may be thinking, how can we use this at my school? What would be the purpose? I'm going to start by saying the tools charts do offer a lot of information. These have been going for over a decade now, so we have a lot of tools on there across many grade levels, and we have many standards. So it does have a lot of information. And what we like to do is describe the tools chart similar to the way you would look at a nutrition label. So a nutrition label gives you a lot of information about the food product you may be considering eating or purchasing. But when you look at a nutrition label, you may not be interested in everything. You may be trying to reduce the amount of sugar. So you may look at the sugar in this food first. Or maybe you want to increase the amount of protein you're eating, so you look for the protein in that. The same is true for the tools charts. As I mentioned earlier, you may be really considering tools that you want something that has high validity and reliability, this high technical standards. So you may be looking for tools with that in mind. Other schools may say, well, we are really resource dependent here. We don't have technology to administer anything on the computers. We really need to find a good program that has good reliability, all those technical standards, but also can be administered by hand and does not take a lot of time to score. Those are all decisions that are important based on school resources, also based on student need, that need to go into these decisions. So what we recommend is that you gather a team. So this may be the IEP team, it may be a team of teachers. You determine your needs and the students' needs, but then you also consider your priorities. Again, thinking about those resources, what you have at your school and the contextual variables that may come into play with this. We then recommend familiarizing yourself with the content and language of the chart. So great, we've done that step 4, so you can go back and share with others at your school, really familiarizing yourself with what's on there, clicking on those pop-ups to learn a little bit more and familiarizing yourself with the layout. Then reviewing the data. Again, this could be for analyzing or evaluating a tool that you currently have to see if it's a good tool to continue using for progress monitoring, or maybe you're in the position to choose a new progress monitoring tool that you want to use across your school. So reviewing the data for that. And then there's also the option of asking for more information. The tools charts include information about vendor contacts. So perhaps there's information that you want to learn more, you're interested in purchasing the product, but you would like to learn more about the training or the cost of the product. We have the vendor information on the tools chart, and you are more than welcome to reach out to them to ask those specific questions and get those answered if you are going to decide to use a tool that's listed on the tools chart. On our NCII website, we also have a tools chart user's guide that we developed that it's more of a workbook that goes into more of these details across the 6 steps to help you use the tools charts to make decisions about the tools you have or the tools you would like to select. So thank you all for your time. If you'd like to learn more, we are at intensiveintervention.org. We have a whole web page dedicated to our 6 intervention tools charts that will guide you to see all the other tools charts to learn more information. We have our email address there and our Twitter page if you'd like to learn more or contact us for any reason. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin, and thanks, Shidi and Kim. And if you all want to learn more about a lot of the resources that you've seen today, we do recommend that you visit the websites that were referenced today, and we'll put those in the chat box. But one of the other centers that is not present today, but has participated in previous webinars, that does have a lot of information about this, is our Center for Parent Information and Resources, and really speaks to this component of the IEP in the development, right, of the monitoring plan to support IEP goals. And so we're going to start our Q&A session, but I just wanted to let people know, you may not know this, but Caitlin was sharing about the academic progress monitoring tools chart, and it is the longest running tools chart that has been funded under the IDEA Technical Assistance Program. And it actually started with the National Center on Student Progress Monitoring that was funded in 2002 to 2007. And so other national centers, including the National Center on Response to Intervention and then the National Center on Intensive Intervention, have increased the number of tools charts that are available. Now, Caitlin, we did have a question around what are the different tools charts? Do we see the screening and progress monitoring tools on the same chart, or what is available?
Sure. So each of the tools charts is its own web page. So when you go to the website, if you go to the landing page, you will see 6 options for selecting each of the tools charts. So you would click on academic progress monitoring, and everything I shared with you today is just academic progress monitoring. It's the same for academic screening. You'll notice that some of the standards we rate and some of the information we provide is slightly different and adapted to what's appropriate for screening tools. And then the same with interventions. Those are on 2 separate pages, one for academics, one for behavior. You can visit each of those separately.
And one of the things that you didn't mention, you seem to mention academic and behavior, and there seems to be a lot of focus around social and emotional. Are those types of tools available on the tools charts that are offered by the National Center on Intensive Intervention?
If there are tools available out there that have been submitted under the realm of social emotional and they have been reviewed, they are on our tools charts. Right now, we currently don't have any under that domain, but we are always looking for new submissions and new tools. Again, this is something that is voluntary, that vendors respond to our calls for submission. So if you use a tool or you know of a tool and you would want it to be rated by our TRC and on our tools charts, please don't hesitate to reach out with us, because we are always looking to expand and add more tools to our charts, especially in the area of behavior, social, emotional learning, mental health.
All right, thanks, Caitlin. And I'm going to ask Kim and Shidi to come on, because we do have some other questions coming in from our participants. And I just want to say that we will try to answer as many questions as we are able to. If we do not get to your question or you want to have it answered at a separate time, you can email us at the progresscenter@air.org. Don't put the in front of it with any additional questions, and we will get back to you. Now, I am a recovering faculty member, and I've actually used the IRIS modules as part of my educator preparation program. And based on some of the conversation in the chat, it looks like a lot of other people have and really had a great experience with these. Kim, can you share, are these resources just for educator prep programs, or how can they be used by related service providers and administrators who are also on the call?
Yeah, actually, the IRIS resources can be used by teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals, related service providers, and even parents. So we have a lot of people as we're going through our weekly feedback and data who are using the module. So they can be used in a number of ways and by a number of different constituent groups.
Sorry, it takes me a little while to find my unmute button. So you can see we did have a question around the email address. Feel free to find that in the chat box. So Kim, I also have a couple of other questions that came in for you. And one of those is, besides the resources that were shared in today's webinar, does the IRIS Center have any other resources to provide additional practice for progress monitoring?
We do. We actually have several. You can locate those by going back to the IRIS Resource Locator, which I demonstrated before, and then clicking on the assessment, which also includes progress monitoring. And once you get there, clicking on the modules tab, you'll find one I think that might be useful. That's the Intensive Intervention Part 2. Collecting and analyzing data for data-based individualization, which we developed in collaboration with NCII and CEDAR. There are also a couple of case studies on progress monitoring. The titles might be a little confusing. They were developed originally to wrap around our RTI series. So the titles are RTI Progress Monitoring and RTI Database Decision Making. But I think they'll be quite helpful, and they align with the content that we presented today.
Excellent. And Caitlin or Shidi, are there any other sort of progress monitoring resources that maybe are in the works or you're aware of from your centers around how to do more practice opportunities with progress monitoring?
I can go here.
Yeah, go ahead.
At the National Center on Intensive Intervention, we also have modules on data-based individualization, and some of those include data collection and progress monitoring for students receiving intensive intervention. So if you visit those resources on our website, they give you more information about the progress monitoring process, what it looks like, when to do it, and what are some ways that you can analyze data for students and make decisions.
Right, and I do know there are some other resources that are in the works around, it looks like the NCII and Progress Center have developed a learning management system, that there will be some additional progress monitoring resources in there. So we definitely look forward to seeing those. And so I want to just point out something that was in the chat box that I thought was really great is Angela, one of our participants, had mentioned, that when we're referring to progress, we're referring to progress on IEP goals, not necessarily grades, for your report cards or grade level standards. And we just want to reiterate that that is exactly what we're talking about, particularly with the monitoring plan, is that we're looking at those individualized goals that are set for the student that are necessary for the student to achieve, to benefit and have access to core programming, make progress in the general education curriculum. So I wanted to thank you, Angela, for highlighting that, because I think that's something we often forget about. Now, we'd like to have our teachers, the question we had come in, I'd like to have our teachers work through the IRIS progress monitoring modules. And Kim, you had mentioned about the PD certificates, and that's kind of a novel thing that's coming out of our national centers. So can schools do that? I know we have a lot of administrators on the call. Is that something they can do with a large number of teachers, or is this something only individual teachers are able to do? And what's the cost of that?
Okay, so we do have platforms for schools and districts. And it's one of those things where it's probably best to call us, contact our technical assistance center, and Naomi can put the information in the chat box because there are so many different options. They can go through and their individual educators can work through those, but we also have school and district platforms available so that it's easier to collect the data on the educators for that. So I would just encourage them to contact us to explore those different options.
Thanks. And this, I'll leave this open, but this might be geared towards Caitlin. So we did have a comment, and I just want to put it out there because it kind of leads to another question we had, is one of the conundrums that people are seeing is that they're being required to use a particular tool in their setting. And what should schools be doing about that? And what happens if their tool is not on the tools chart and they're being asked to use it?
Great questions. So sort of two prongs here. One, if you're being required to use a tool, you can use our tools chart if it's on there to simply understand sort of the strengths and weaknesses. So as I mentioned, there's no tool that's going to be one size fits all, no tool that's going to be perfect for every context, every student, every situation. So in that situation, it's more so understanding the strengths and perhaps some of the limitations of the progress monitoring tool that you have to know that if it's going to be able to give you the information you need, or perhaps you may need to supplement that with something else. If your tool is not on the tools chart, then again, if this is a district thing and lots of schools are using it, we always like suggestions for new tools. In that situation, you could use the tools chart to understand the kinds of technical standards that we do review and rate for. And then with your school, you could go through that process at the end if the tool does have a manual and look through some of the evidence that they are providing so that your team can assess if it does meet some of the technical standards. It does show that there are features that are relevant to the students of use. And again, it's just making sure that most of all, you're using the tool as intended to make sure that you can show those outcomes for the students.
Yeah, and I would, remind folks that when we first started, a lot of the progress monitoring tools, like I mentioned, the tools chart didn't actually exist until the Progress Monitoring Center was funded in 2002. But prior to that, we've been doing progress monitoring. And so as Caitlin mentioned, I think really understanding what are the technical requirements, are you maintaining fidelity to the collection of that data, which is really important, and being very clear about what it is you're monitoring. And so one of the questions that we had is Kim had mentioned, this difference between mastery measures and general outcome measures. But when you look at the tools chart, that used to be there, but it's not there anymore. So Caitlin, can you give us a little insight about what happened to that?
You're just going to open up a whole can of worms, Tessie. So with something like a tools chart that's been in existence for nearly 20 years now, I'm sure you all are all familiar that the pendulum in education swings back and forth. We're constantly learning and evolving. So our tools charts used to break down tools with general outcome measures and mastery measures. And over time, we received user feedback and we received feedback from our technical review committees and decided that there were parts of it that were confusing to the end user and that the majority of our tools on the tools chart are general outcome measures. So we have reduced that or removed that as a separate column, knowing that the majority of our tools on the tools chart are general outcome measures. And so that's just a little bit of background information there, so that when you visit the tools chart, just know that that is the type of information that you are receiving. And again, that's just a decision that was made over time based on feedback from administrators and teachers and consumers of the chart and our technical review committees.
Thanks, Caitlin. And we did have a question, and it's more of a comment, and I'll address it, is there are some students for which the tools that exist on the tools chart may not be appropriate. And to be honest, students may have IEP goals that are unique to behaviors that don't necessarily have a published tool. And so I think that's where the technical sort of standards that you laid out, Caitlin, help us think about what are those key features of what would be in a progress monitoring plan. Sheedy shared, several components of that need to be there. It is okay, and it's completely appropriate to develop a curriculum-based assessment that's unique for a student, particularly those with more severe cognitive disabilities, or I know we have related service providers on the session today who are developing assessment approaches that are unique to a particular progress or to a particular annual goal. And so we want to share that the tools chart is one resource to help folks, particularly if you're monitoring academics or behavior, but just know that there are other ways that us as educators, using our knowledge and skills, can develop monitoring plans that are also unique to the students that we work with. So I want to just ask one more question, and it has to do with an electronic progress monitoring tool and graphing system. It seems like everybody mentioned that the graphing was a really critical piece of this, but this user does not have a published tool and their district is not going to purchase that. Does that mean they can't do it paper pencil, or is there any free things that are available for them to do graphing? And I'll open that up to anyone. Or I'll share.
Sure.
Yeah, so I will share that I am aware that on the National Center on Intensive Intervention, and we can share that link in the chat, there is a free graphing tool that is available for folks. But I will also say paper pencil still reigns supreme. And that's because if you are doing that paper pencil, you can do that with the student that you're working with, that sort of understanding where you are as a kid in terms of your learning can be very empowering. So I just want to also remind folks that when we talk about graphing, it doesn't have to be in a fancy system, that it can be a paper pencil system. And I know, Kim, with the IRIS Center, that you all have some resources that are some link graphing tools that have some of those practice opportunities to demonstrate how to do that in a sort of paper pencil way.
Right.
Great. All right, so we are just at the close, and I want to move us on and thank our presenters. If you have some additional questions, please share this in the chat, and please email us if you have some additional questions or some things that are unique to your site. We do hope that you will stay connected with us. You can follow us at K-12 Progress on our Facebook and Twitter. You can also stay up to date about resources and tools. The National Center on Intensive Intervention, the IRIS Center, and the Progress Center do collaborate to ensure that our resources, our modules, our training materials are aligned in terms of language and outcomes. So feel free to contact any of us. We all also have our own newsletters that you can follow. I also want to remind folks that we'd love to hear your feedback about today's webinar or things that you'd like to see in the future. So please fill out the feedback form that you'll see now in the chat box. And we want to thank you so much for the great chat. This was our first time with Zoom, and it really helped with the chat, with the interaction. And thanks again to Caitlin, Sheedy, and Kim for joining us and sharing the great resources that you have from your center.